Today we're going to talk about the 10 reasons why dating in Poland is much better than America. So let's talk about everybody's favorite topic, race. Every society has races that are like high status and low status. In America, the white man and the Asian woman are the most desirable, whereas the Asian man and the black woman are the least desirable. It goes back to a lot of negative cultural stereotypes that we have against certain races. I don't think fetishization is always bad. We can use it to our benefit to help us achieve the result that we want. As an Asian man, I believe that we're seen as good partners here because of a lot of cultural overlap. And we have a lot of very similar societal values, the ways that we view family, the way that we view societal order, the way that we view stability. K-pop also seems to be ridiculously big here in just Eastern Europe in general. The K-drama fantasy is this man who's handsome, kind, soft-spoken, not aggressive, and the women are still kind of in charge, if that makes sense. Being an Asian kind of fulfills that fantasy. But the experience that a lot of my black friends have is that they'll often get sexualized, but they're not seen as long-term relationship potential. And often after a couple of instances with sex or whatever, then they'll get ghosted. And I think that's because there is a taboo around black people here. Poland has a reputation for being racist to like Arabs and black people, and that's kind of true. But I think it's that taboo that makes black men very appealing. There is the fantasy that women have as well of like taming the beast. Black men are physically on a different level, I think, than other races. And I think that's good and a bad thing. An observation I've made is that a lot of Polish women in the UK, for example, gravitate towards black men because they are in a different context and black men are seen as more high status in that specific context. Another important point is all of my black friends here come from two-parent Christian households, whether they're Jamaican or they're African. And those guys integrate extremely well here because Poland is a Christian country. All of them are in long-term serious relationships. A lot of black guys get with Ukrainians actually. Just understand that you will have both positive and negative stereotypes put against you because it's a homogenous society. That's just how it is. Let's talk about sex. Funny enough, here in Poland, people are highly sexual. America is weird because everything is hypersexualized, but we have this weird half taboo around sex as well. For example, when you see two men hugging and expressing love for each other, people automatically assume, oh, that's gay, or there's like sexual intent behind it. Whereas I feel like in many other countries, if two guys are hugging, if they're brothers or if they're best friends, it's totally normal, right? There's not that sexual element added into it. I remember growing up, so many movies and TV shows had so many sex scenes with no purpose whatsoever. In America, there's a lot of like sexual liberation to a certain extent. Women don't have any negative consequences for publicly being a whore. I think the women here understand if you're seen as a whore, men will treat you as a whore. Here and in Eastern Europe, they'll get slut shamed, not just by men, but mainly by other women, by their mom. You can say whatever you want about women empowerment, or you should let women live how they want to live. But what environment do you want your daughter to be raised in? Let's be honest, right? I want my daughter to be raised in an environment where women are taught to be classy, to act with grace. Something I've noticed here in Poland, people seem to embrace their sexuality quite a bit, especially in the context of a relationship. I like how during the summer, the women here have this like sensuality where they'll wear like a very tightly clad dress with no bra. So you can still kind of see things, but they still kind of maintain that classiness. I remember going out to the clubs in the US and a lot of these women would just be wearing practically nothing, right? You can still find girls like that here, but that seems to be the minority. And I'm gonna be honest, Slavic people seem to have very high sex drives. That's because a lot of them watch porn from a young age, including the women. A lot of the porn here, like Russian porn, is very aggressive as well. So they like aggressive sex. In society, you have this mix where in public, everybody presents well. You know, you can talk about sex, but you don't want to be too obvious about it. But in a private setting, anything goes. And people are actually very sexually charged here. And I think that's a good balance to have. Asian cultures, we are kind of repressed on all aspects. So we want to present very well and modestly in public, but behind the bedroom, we're also not as open sexually because, you know, there's a lot of shame around it. I don't think there's anything wrong with moving to another place for love. Your partner is the single most important decision that you will make in your life, and it will determine how happy and satisfied your life will be in the long term. So if you can put yourself in a position where you have a higher probability of finding a high quality partner, I think that's totally okay. A lot of people move to another place in hopes of finding love, but I believe they're doing it backwards. If you want to move, I believe you have to move to that place first, see if you like the culture, see if you like the environment, and then find a partner instead of going somewhere just to find a partner. Because a lot of men specifically that do this, especially here in Poland, they come here because of a girl. They know nothing about the culture. They don't know the language, they don't end up making any friends here, and they rely on their partner so much for scheduling doctor's appointments, for bureaucracy, all of that. I think that's just too much pressure in a relationship. What I recommend, if you like Poland just because you like living here, and you like what the culture stands for, it's very easy to date because you already are in alignment with that given culture, right? So it solves a lot of issues, and if you have your own friends and your own community here, you are not super reliant on the relationship, and you can just live a more well-balanced life. That's why if you want to move to Poland or anywhere else in the world, there's a lot of things that you have to think about. So if you guys are thinking about moving abroad, I highly recommend scheduling an intro call here where we can talk about if Poland or some other places will be the right fit for you. Dating in America heavily favors the women. Divorce laws also heavily favor women. And in America specifically, I think people are very delusional. Women have these ridiculous expectations on how a man should treat them, even though they aren't taught what to provide in a relationship. And men are taught what to provide in a relationship, but not what to expect from a woman. And a lot of times when you're a man expecting a woman to fulfill her womanly roles, you'll get called all of these names. Here in Poland, there's a little bit of that feminism movement growing as well, especially in the more liberal cities. But I still think that it's a healthy balance where the women are like strong and independent, but they also kind of want a man, and they see it as a true partnership instead of like a man-woman dynamic. Ukrainians and the Belarusians are a little bit more traditional in this aspect where they lean more towards the man-woman dynamic, but it's also city dependent. If they come from a big city, they're going to want a specific set of things compared to the ones that come from the small cities who are a little bit more traditional. I don't think women's independence is a problem. I think the problem is when women want the authority and privileges of men, but still want society to treat them as a woman. So it's like they want equality, but only in the ways that favor them. They don't want true equality. I think here in Poland, the people seem to be a lot more reasonable, and I think it's more true equality, maybe a little bit closer to the Scandinavian way of thinking, because especially in Gdańsk and towards the north, they're actually quite close to the Scandinavian countries. There's a lot of Scandinavian influence there. Something I like is that people seem to be a lot more direct here, specifically the women. If they like you, you're going to know. Now, from my experience, right, there have been some girls where I had to pursue them, and there were other girls that went out of their way to message me first. They didn't directly ask me out on a date or anything, but they made it very clear that they were interested in me. I feel like the people here play a lot less games and are a lot more honest in what they expect from a relationship and just life in general, right? The culture here is that Polish people are very direct and they're very honest. And I think that is because of the language. The language is very precise and it's a feeling language very similar to Spanish. So in the US, I feel like there's this whole like dating game that you have to play where you don't want to show that you're super interested, so you don't scare them off. And it's a lot of like low trust behavior, if that makes sense. Nobody wants to get hurt. A lot of that goes away in homogenous societies because there is a unifying culture that promotes or discourages certain kinds of behavior. So I think the best way to think about dating is through the lens of supply and demand. And this applies to both men and women. If there is a high demand for your specific type, for your specific race, and the supply is low, you're going to be seen as a lot more attractive just because of that context. In every single society around the world, one gender will have a lot more leverage than the others. It cannot have equally 50% men and 50% women. For example, in Ukraine and Russia, right now they have a shortage of men because a lot of men died fighting this war. Whereas in China, they have a shortage of women because they had the one-child policy for a long time, and a lot of families decided to have men. In the US, I believe that the women have most of the leverage because women are doing really well, they're making money, but also because of the fact that they are obese. If you are not obese in the US, you automatically get 2 points. Here in Poland, I believe men have the power because there's a lot of competition for the women. Polish women already are very physically beautiful, but after the war, a lot of Ukrainians came into the country, particularly women, because men, if you were over 18, were not allowed to leave Ukraine. On top of the fact that women are now dominating universities, they have a lot of managerial positions. Women seem to be a lot more independent and ambitious than the men are on average. So the demand for ambitious men is quite high here in Poland. Dating apps here, in my opinion, as a foreigner, don't really work that well because there is a growing pickup artist community here, especially in Warsaw. If you're in tourist cities like Krakow, if you're on Tinder Tinder or whatever, people are just gonna assume you're a tourist or you're here for a short time. It's a lot of foreigners competing for a small pool of women. But a lot of Polish people have told me that that's how they have met their partners. So it seems to work quite well for Polish people wanting to meet each other. But as a foreigner, I don't think that's the most effective. So if dating apps don't work, what does work? Social scene is probably the most powerful one. Cold approach in general is not the societal norm here. I was talking to a couple of Ukrainian girls and they were complaining that they would dress up really nicely and go out, but nobody would go up to them and approach, whereas in Ukraine that happened to them all the time. Societal norm here is that everyone just kind of stays to their groups and minds their own business. That's why it's important to find a community, live in certain environments where you can easily meet other people. And this is all the things that we talk about in a personalized consultation call, and then you can schedule that here. Big problem with the US is that because it's a car-centric society, it's a lot harder to meet up with people and to socialize. One of the reasons why I love Poland or Europe in general is that a lot of the cities are like 15-minute walking cities. You can take public transportation to get anywhere in the city. It's very easy to meet up with your friends. There's a high emphasis on social culture here. If you go out drinking with your friends, you don't have to drive home. You can either take public transportation or take an Uber back to your place, and it's quite affordable. In America, because it's a car culture, number one, it takes a lot more effort to socialize with your friends because you have to get in your car and you have to go somewhere. And because a lot of people are driving, it discourages drinking. Reputation matters a lot. Other than Warsaw, which is a big city, at least in Poland's terms, you're a lot more anonymous, so people care less about their reputation. But I think in general, especially in the small cities, everybody knows each other, so your reputation is very important. Women want to still be seen as modest. In general, women don't want to be seen as hoes. And men don't really want to be seen as bad men or homewreckers or abusive. I think this is a good thing because it discourages shitty behavior from men and women, and it also enforces societal norms around relationship, around loyalty, around family. I think a lot of men think that they can just come here and clean up because they are American or they have money, but it's not really like that. A lot of Polish people have money. They come from healthy two-parent households. People here value long-term relationships a lot more. I think the weather and the culture both have a lot to do with that. Hookup culture still exists, especially in a big city like Warsaw, but it's not to the same level as it is in the US or a lot of Western European countries. People here tend to look for stability in life and their partner. They have this mentality of uniting families when people are dating. So even if you're dating and you're like 18 or 19 years old, you'll often get invited to a lot of family gatherings for the holidays, but you'll also get invited to vacations with the family as well, right? You automatically become a part of the family. And if your reputation matters and you're really involved with another family, you're gonna be less inclined to behave badly. Divorce exists here in Poland, but it's much different than it is in the US. Most of the people that I've met here come from two-parent households, but I've met a lot of people who come from divorced families. The big difference is that most of the time, the kids have a good relationship with both of the parents and both of the parents are still on good terms. A lot of times the parents will have their new partners or separate families, but they still maintain a mature, healthy relationship with their previous partner. I haven't heard too many instances of men getting completely destroyed in a marriage where she takes like half of his stuff and all those things, the same way that I do in the US. I'm so scared to get married in the US because there's a tremendous amount of risk from the man's side and the laws favor women. So let's say the woman does something, she cheats on me and I file for divorce and she can still take half my stuff. The incentive structure just doesn't make any sense. It could be because of the capitalism nature of the country as well, where divorce lawyers are incentivized to make divorces as long and arduous as possible. Here in Poland, similar to a lot of Asian countries, divorce isn't really glamorized or I would say encouraged. But it's also not taboo or shameful, and I think it's very mature. This is why understanding of the culture and the language is very important. Polish is a very complicated language, but it's very precise and it's very expressive. That means that the people here have a strong emphasis on communication. And I think this carries over to how parents interact with their kids, which I've seen is very healthy here, but also how people interact in their relationships. Communication is like one of the big foundations of the relationship. And number one, cheating is not encouraged at all. Loyalty is a very big value here in Poland, and not in just relationships. Loyalty to country, loyalty to family, all of these are very positive values. So of course they carry over into relationships. I think the family is the fundamental building block of society, right? So if society encourages nuclear families where men and women do not get divorced, and men are not encouraged to cheat on their partner, in a lot of ways the women are more scandalous than the men here, but that's a topic for a different day. If you are of Polish descent and living in America or Canada or any of these Western European countries, I highly recommend that you come back to Poland. If you value family, if you value stability, Poland is also an amazing place for that. So if you guys are interested in moving to Poland, set up an intro call here where we can talk about if Poland may be the right fit for you. I'll see you on the next one. Bye.